No better sound, is there? Coming from an Aussie. How's it going? Alright, cool. My speaker notes are on the laptop way over there, so I wasn't as prepared as what Jordan was, so we'll just see what happens. So I'm Aaron. My talk is called Ember When the Lights Go On. Let's see if this thing works. Firstly, a little bit about me. I'm not from around here, as you can probably tell. Basically been developing since 2000, mainly JavaScript, Ruby, in a previous life, Java and Lotus Notes, but I haven't told anyone in the UK that, so you guys now know a secret about me no one else does. Just don't tell the recruiters. I am one of the core maintainers of the official Ember CLI deployment tool, Ember CLI Deploy. Don't know if any of you guys use Ember, but check it out if you're interested in how to deploy your Ember apps. I'm a father and husband to these two. That's Noah. That was his birthday yesterday. He's cute. And I currently work at Sky for the Penguins team. This is actually a penguin. It's a pretty endangered species found somewhere in southern Antarctica. I don't know if anyone saw the episode of Blue Planet where they showed about these guys. They're pretty rare. So basically, this is not actually a presentation about Ember's better than everything else. You should all use Ember at all. It's more about my time and journey in the Penguins team, bringing Ember into the team, introducing it to the guys there who had little to no experience in Java, JavaScript, or front-end MVC frameworks. But I guess before talking about that, I just wanted to look at this. This is sort of to show you it's not so much about Ember is awesome. You can apply these things that we've learned to any front-end MVC framework. Basically, MVC front-end frameworks kind of boiled down to these 5 different factors. You've got interacting with data stores, you've got rendering data to UI, responding to user interactions, routing and URLs, and just project stuff, file organization, build tools and things like that. So I found this chart from a guy called Ryan Florence who did a talk a while back about this. He used to be a pretty heavy contributor to Ember. He has since defected to React. But what he did, he sort of took 5 of the main front-end frameworks, which I'm guessing if any of you guys do any JavaScript, you've probably used one or more of these, and sort of put down not so much how the frameworks, how good they are at these 5 things, but more how concerned they are. And I guess what I wanted to illustrate here was it's not whether one's better than the other, it's more about using the right tool for the job. So you can sort of see Polymer and React are sort of really concerned with the front-end stuff, the rendering, the components, the user interactions. Angular, sort of that, plus a bit of data, bit of project stuff. And then Ember is is concerned about everything. It's trying to get the build tools in there with Ember CLI. It's got Ember data for the data stuff. The routers is a massive part of Ember. So yeah, this really just illustrates that each of the tools do a different job, and it depends what you're after. But we chose Ember for sort of different reasons, and this is our journey in doing that. So, the Penguins' journey with Ember. My speaker notes would be really freaking handy right now. Let me just see what the next slide is. Cool. So I guess I've been using Ember for about 2 years, and I brought it to the team as like an idea we could maybe use, but we sort of put it off. We didn't want to jump onto like the latest and greatest new shiny thing. There were many reasons why we couldn't use it. We actually had a Rails app, but we had lots of different things such as tight deadlines. There was quite a lack of confidence with using JavaScript. So there are a whole bunch of reasons why we didn't jump straight into it. And I guess we just needed to sort of take our time and just validate the reason for actually moving. So we didn't just jump in and just start migrating stuff. We needed to validate the switch. So this chat's all about those light bulb moments when you're just sort of waiting, and then all of a sudden you go click, yes, this is awesome, this is the time to jump in. So I don't know if any of you guys have sort of seen that. Does anyone here actually use Ember day to day? Josh? Yeah. Anyone doing anything in React at the moment? Angular? JavaScript? Cool, okay. So those doing JavaScript, but none of those sort of frameworks, are you looking at maybe trying to find an MVC framework to bring in, to use, trying to evaluate whether it's a good idea to make the switch? Silence. All right, cool. So yeah, we're waiting for our light bulbs to go on. Ding. So basically, let's set the scene where we've got an app here. This is one of the Sky service status apps. So basically, when your service is maybe not performing as best as it should, you might come here and just try and find out what the problem was. So traditionally, this was a Rails app. It was very, very static. So basically, a team of people in Scotland would enter some issues in when there was an issue somewhere, and you would go there and sort of see where there was a problem with Sky's overall infrastructure. But over time, our product owners wanted to make it a bit more personalized. They wanted to start pulling data feeds in to see your actual service, your personal service, down to your street and home level, as opposed to what Sky's broadband service in the UK was like. So you can sort of start, the page is pretty simple, but we went from a pretty static site to something that had a bit more dynamic content in it. So we were pulling content in from multiple different sources, some of them slower than others, kind of asynchronously. The top stuff is more about your user account and whether you've got any restrictions, you've got whether you've got any issues on your services coming back. These things can kind of come back at different times, and if there are issues, then you've got sort of an accordion there that opens up with more details. So you can sort of see we've gone from something very static to now we have different parts of the page that's pulling different data in that can return it at any time, really, and we need to update the page. So these are the sorts of things that made us start thinking maybe we should look at a front-end framework. So, pretty standard app. We had some not amazing code. Most of the team weren't JavaScript developers, so we saw what you tend to see in these sort of projects. Stuff gets put in somewhere and someone else comes in and goes, oh, that's how you do it, and they copy and paste, and you end up with some pretty standard stuff. We're hiding and showing a few different things here. And we start making a couple of calls to an endpoint and things like that. And we end up with just a bunch of methods where we're changing content and stuff on the screen based on different things. This is what our code started to look like. So this is where our first light bulb moment sort of came. We started doing manipulation of the UI based on some data instead of our traditional web app just serving the page back. But that wasn't enough for us yet. We still wanted to make sure we were doing the right thing. So we ended up with a few more functions like this, where we're making some more calls, where we're using promises and things. We're doing a couple of things based on that data. And then all of a sudden, we get a commit that's like this. We refactor it to a page object controller. So we had some functionality for this page that seemed to be scattered, sprinkled around everywhere, as DHH would say. And it's been refactored into an object that was sort of a controller for the page. And it looks something like this. So that was where our second light bulb kind of came on. We started getting these objects in our code base with a name of controller, sort of responsible for the stuff happening in a page. Then we started getting things like this, objects that were to do with our domain. We have a user here with different things on it. And we have diagnostics and a CBS object and things like that. And then all of a sudden they started getting, they look like models, and we started interacting with data stores and pulling data in. And so each of these things, we start moving closer to the reasons why maybe a front-end framework would be quite handy. Is anyone sort of seeing this sort of stuff in their apps? Silence again. Okay. To carry on a bit further, we started to get lots of functionality on the different parts of the page, and we started pulling those out into these other little classes, so which was to do with sort of hiding and showing the different parts, and they started to be called views, whether it was good or not. But we started having these view type objects, ding, ding, ding. And then finally, we started to need to duplicate parts of the DOM, and we pulled in handlebars to do some templating for us, which was really handy. But all of a sudden, we started to realize that once we're doing that, we're starting to build our own framework. Except there was one difference. We were doing it really, really badly. And essentially, this is what happens when you start sort of building something. You start scaling a little bit. Maybe you get people that aren't as confident in the language or the technologies you're using. Whatever happens, you essentially start building your own framework. And a wise guy, hold on. Wow, man, that went. Wise guy once said, use a framework or don't, but either way you will. And I think that saying's pretty cool, because it's so true. Like, whether we like it or not, we start building our own framework, except we don't have the help of a massive community of people. And we don't have a battle tested by thousands of users. It's essentially going to be probably a less than desirable framework in the end. You start getting your own people's opinions put in there over time, and it can turn into a bit of a mess. And that's what was happening for us. So we decided to go with something that had a bit more structure, that could actually impose its opinions on us and teach us some good lessons, hopefully. So I think the cool stuff that we started to get from Ember pretty quickly on, once those light bulbs kind of went off in our heads and we decided to make the switch, was Ember gave us convention over configuration. It's heavily inspired by Rails in a way. So you can see things like when we have a post resource, all of a sudden Ember expects there to be a post root controller view and a posts HB handlebars file. And if they don't exist, it'll just auto-generate those for you. So there's real convention. We didn't need to care about where to put stuff, what to call stuff. We were already told that, which we found quite cool. This also really helps when you bring in new people. When you have a home-rolled framework, often new devs can take some time to get up to speed with it, whereas if they know exactly where things are meant to be, much like Rails, you can drop in and be productive in hours instead of days or weeks. Can't go back. There we go. This clicker is awesome, Josh. There we go, no more globals, yeah. So instead of having loads of globals everywhere, because basically people didn't really know where to put stuff or how to define stuff, Ember and Ember CLI use ES6 or ES 2015 modules. So now we started exporting our objects and using them like that, which is really cool. We cleaned up our code loads and we stopped putting stuff in the global namespace. Our data binding using Ember data, we ended up with real model objects which we could bind to the templates perfectly, so we didn't need to worry about updating things with jQuery. It sort of all happens. You change something in the model and it updates on the template. Again, none of this stuff is specific to Ember, but these are the things that we found really useful. The light bulb moments didn't stop there. Once we made that switch, we actually started to learn stuff and find stuff out that we didn't expect. So one of the big things, and this is Ember specific, so if anyone is actually thinking of switching, especially people that are used to Rails or any server-side web framework, leave your assumptions at the door. Basically what you think you know about building a web app is not exactly accurate when you start using Ember. Okay, so in Rails we have our this is my sketch skills to the test here. Rails, you have the normal things. You have router, controller, model, and view. And in Ember you have objects that are named very similar. You have a router, controller, model, view. You have also template and roots. Except we learned pretty quickly that what is going on? Come on. That a controller is not really like a controller. A controller is kind of like a view model in a way. It really decorates the model in Ember. And then, come on. Can someone press right for me? Yes. Go back one. And our views aren't really views. Templates are more like views. And routes are actually more like controllers. So we started to learn that if we try and treat Ember like Rails, we're going to have a really bad time, because while things are called the same things, their responsibilities are actually very different. So this is just something really, really important, I think. Leave your assumptions at the door, leave what you think you know, and just try and understand how Ember wants you to work. You'll have a much more pleasant time doing it. Don't fight the framework. This is a massive one too. It kind of goes along with that last slide. Yeah, so, oh Jesus, yeah, oh my gosh. You're playing a prank on me tonight, aren't you? Let's trick the London guy. All right, come on. Oh, if you could, that'd be really good. It might be a bit quicker. Cheers, man, thanks. There we go, don't fight the framework. All right, my new clicker will be Josh. Thank you. Yeah, man, go for it. Yep. Yep. Cool. So if something feels harder than it should be, then it probably is. You're probably doing it wrong. And this is something that we really found with Ember as well. It's like, if things do seem harder, or you're there banging your head against the wall, it's probably because you're not doing it how Ember would like you to. Whether you like that idea or not, that's up for debate. But it is very opinionated, so just step back a bit and try and do a bit of research and understand where the bug in your understanding of how Ember's working is, because it's a massive one. Keep going. Yep. This one, UI error logging. So I guess when we started to switch from a server-side app with a sprinkling of JavaScript to a full application in JavaScript, we started to really realize how little or how non-existent our UI error logging was. So does anyone here have JavaScript in their server-side web apps? Nope. Okay. Anyway. Most people that I talk to that do really don't think too much about UI error logging, but when your whole application is in JavaScript, you kind of have to do that because you don't have the luxury of server-side logs. So we found this really, really important, that you need to sort of put this at the top of your priority list. It's not something you think about so much in website development. Oh. Can you do it? Yeah. So Ember gives you some hooks here, so does RSVP, where you can just sort of hook into the errors and send them wherever you need to, whether it's a software as a service thing or whether you just have your own endpoint. And separation of the UI and the API. If you go to the next one. So when you start to build your app in the front end, you start to really see your app as two separate things. You have your API, which is your representation of your data, and you have your front end, which is a client. Before that, we found with the devs that were sort of very server-side, they just saw the app as one big thing, and you hit a URL and you end up in your code somewhere in your controller. Whereas you really start to see that your front-end app is really just a client, of which there could be many, and you stop seeing your API as a way to make user interactions happen, but it's a way just to visualize your data. So this is a really important thing. I think it becomes really powerful when you can sort of split in your mind that mental model that your front-end app is a client and your API is literally just a way to expose that data. So think not of your API in terms of UI interactions, but in terms of the data and its relationships. Because the app is a client of your API. Yeah, I've already said that. Speaking needs to be handy. And so I guess the last couple of things, I had a few more slides after here, but I've cut it down. So these three things, actually you can press it a couple of times there, Josh. These three things sort of warrant a chat in its own. So I'd love to talk to you guys about these things, but these are the things that we've sort of really learnt having implemented Ember. And if you want to come along on Thursday, I'd love to dive a bit deeper into this sort of stuff. We can hack on some code and things like that. But basically, the build tools around Ember and Ember CLI are amazing. Ember CLI is a really amazing piece of technology. It's sort of screamed way past what you get with Rails. It's really, really cool. And you can do some really cool stuff. We started implementing, I don't know if anyone cares too much about the deployment of their apps, but we do continuous deployment in the Wengwins team. So every single commit basically runs the integration tests and will push to production automatically if they pass. When we started playing with some different ways to deploy our apps, now that they're front-end MVC apps, they're basically just static files. So we essentially push the static files to S3, and we store our index HTML not in the file system, but in a Redis database, which allows us to really quickly upload that and then serve that from an Express server. But what that also means is we can now deploy stuff to production and access different branches just by putting a query parameter onto the end of our URL, which pulls out a different version of the index HTML from Redis. So we can see different versions without actually activating them, making them go live, but we can run them against production databases if we want to. It's really good for stakeholders checking it out and all that sort of stuff. But it's really cool. It's just other ways to think about deploying, because we use Heroku and things like that, but that actually gets quite slow. But there are other ways to do it. So we've looked into this, and it's actually really cool. You can get some blazingly fast deployments going on with zero downtime. It's amazing. And also packed file testing is something that not many people have probably heard of, but as we start to split the API from the front end, you start to get the problems where you make changes to your API and you don't actually know if you've broken any of the clients that are talking to it. You can't really verify that. But I guess I just wanted to sort of get you guys thinking. I'd love to chat about this sort of stuff because I'm writing some Ember add-ons for this sort of thing, where your front end can produce a file, a packed file, which is kind of like a contract of sorts, which can be publicly accessible. And then when you release your API, you can run automated tests that verify against that packed file. It's kind of like the VCR gem in Ruby, if anyone's used it, but upside down. So there's some really cool stuff that we sort of opened our minds up to, just having start to bring Ember into our lives, and I'd love to chat to you guys about it. So if you're interested in any of this stuff, come and chat to me either at the bar tonight, because we've got a massive tab to get through, or on Thursday at Sky at 2 Wellington Place. I'll be there, and we can hack through some stuff. It'd be really cool. So, I am having trouble with the clicker and have a any questions slide here somewhere. There it is. I'm Aaron. That's how you can get in contact with me.